Hey everybody, Riot Morton, Riot Kent, back again after a long single day of prepping and finalizing the patch. And we are here with the patch 12.13 rundown. You're seeing this Tuesday morning, which means the patch is tomorrow, so that's pretty hype.
Yeah, this is a pretty interesting patch because it's coming off of a 3 week like super long patch where we got to do a almost a full patch in the center. So we're coming back from like some downtime and we locked in the patch a couple weeks ago and then now we're back like yesterday, we spent the whole day basically prepping changes to what we had previously locked in. So a lot of this stuff is fresh.
Yep. Well, let's not beat around the bush. Let's dive right in and see what we have in store. So, all right. First off, some system changes. Pretty small stuff here. The first one is game time. We are trying to shorten game time a little bit. So all the augment rounds were shortened by 10 seconds. 4-7 was shortened by 10 seconds, and 5-1 was shortened by 10 seconds. Really, this should take about 50 seconds off a total game. Augments have been a little long for a while. And yes, we know this is also a Think Fast nerf, and that's intended, to be frank. Think Fast is a little overperforming. So yeah, this should hopefully make games just a little bit quicker in the right way.
Yep, and now everyone's kind of used to these augment rounds. They know you guys all know these augments, and so having a little bit less time just means less downtime where you're sitting around waiting.
Yep. On the player damage side, every time you make something fun, there's always someone out there to ruin it. And unfortunately, people were holding games hostage with Soraka 3. They would put in the Soraka 3, get to 100 health, take out the Soraka 3, lose battles intentionally, and kind of hold games hostage. So now, if you hit stage 8 in standard or double up, the game will end. You'll take 150 damage on loss. That 8-1 is basically sudden death. So enjoy that, and if you somehow make it to 8-1, consider that the end of the game.
Yeah, we were seeing stage 8 was basically almost no players ever got here. But rare cases where it happened, a lot of it would just the Soraka toggling, and so we're solving the problem in that way. And this is also just something that's healthy for the game long term.
Yep. I've played thousands upon thousands of games at various skill levels, and I have never seen 8-1. The farthest I've seen is I got to 7-5. So
Yeah, even 7-5 is like, holy crap, how did you get that far?
yeah. Double up. The double up team heard the feedback around the pick order not being as good. So they're going to try a different pick order here. It's now 4-3 and 4-2, or 4 and 3, then 4 and 2, then 3 and 1, and 2 and 1. So basically, lost streakers don't get both their first item picks, but it's not quite as negative as it was before. Let us know what you think about that. There's also that pick order is visually represented on the scoreboard, so you'll be able to see that. In addition, if reinforcements are canceled, the portal countdown VFX will now cancel immediately instead of playing out, which will make that a little clearer. And the release timers during shared draft have had their updated VFX to be more noticeable. So, a couple nice quality of life changes for double up there.
Yep.
Cool. All right, on the trait side, assassins. We're still seeing a little bit too much of the power in the trait. A pretty clear indicator of that is when the emblem is overperforming compared to the champions. So we're taking a pretty not huge, but like decent nerf to Assassin 2, losing 10% of their critical strike damage, but only 5% at 4 and 6. So if you want to invest in that trait, they'll still hit pretty hard. But really, that 2 Assassin splash we were seeing be a little too valuable, and so that gets knocked down a peg.
Yeah, two assassin already gets a lot of power from having that, added critical strike rate, and just innately they get to jump to the back, so a little bit harder on the nerf there, but the rest is just a tiny nudge.
Yep. Astral. We're trying to make the Astral comp actually a playable, exciting comp. When I say Astral, I don't mean, Varus or Nidalee reroll. I mean actually like 6, 8, or 6 and 9 Astral. So we're buffing the amount of AP you get for running the comp. In addition, there's actually a pretty interesting change here. No more micro shifting your astral counts. It's going to go off of what you had last round. So, for example, if you fielded 3 astral in combat last round, you can't swap in 6 and then roll down. It'll be determined based off what you had last time. And we have a shiny new UI to represent that. So you'll see if you're bronze, silver, or gold tier astral orbs based on what you played. And there's actually a cool counter now. When you refresh, you can actually see how many shops till your next astral shop. So that's a pretty cool quality of life change. I think everyone will be pretty excited for.
Yeah, overall, the new Astral Icon is going to look really cool. But also just these AP buffs for Astral just kind of help you play a little bit more into the deep Astral as you try out the new Aurelion Soul rework that we'll talk about later.
Yep. Cannoneer. We're still seeing a little too much power in Cannoneer 2 and not as much in the vertical. We do want Cannoneer to be something you'd be willing to run 4 or 5 of. So we're nerfing Cannoneer 2 a little bit. That's also to bring down some of early Tristana's power, unless you invest in Cannoneer. If you're willing to go 3, 4, or even 5 now, 5 in particular got a pretty big buff. I think if you're willing to see a Cannoneer, emblem and try to run that 5, the payoff should be worth it. And so hopefully this helps.
Yeah, we're seeing Canino look really odd in the data, and so no one's really trying to go for 5. And with this is a really big buff to 5, and so there should be some really strong 5 Cannoneer comps with this patch.
Yep. Mirage Dawnbringer still overperforming just a tiny bit here, so a little bit of a nerf at 4, 6, and 8. Just a little too much healing, some pretty wild Dawnbringer Nunu 3 stuff. Nothing like obscene, but just a small nerf here.
Yep.
Ragewing. Ragewing was still kind of a victim of Guild Zaya and kind of a misassignment. We talked about this in the patch post-mortem. So we're shifting some of the power a little bit here. 3 Ragewing is going to lose a little bit of its Omnivamp. So if you're running that 3 Ragewing, with either like the 6 Swain Dragonmancer or the Guild Zaya, you're going to have a little less Omnivamp. But 9 gets more Omnivamps if you're willing to run 9. And 6 and 9 both get a little bit more attack speed. So if you're willing to go vertical Ragewing, you can have that little bit of power back. Nothing too crazy here, but just small shifts.
Yeah, we're not saying anybody run 9 Ragewing. It's just a lot of decisions to play around the other splash traits instead of going for this high vertical. And now it should be more of a decision. Do you want to buff up all of these Ragewing champs with after Ragewing gets this pretty hefty buff or somewhat of a hefty buff at 9.
Yep. All right. Continuing on, Revel. We're still seeing Revel just be a little too much of where the power is in the trait. Obviously, Revel Deja being the key one, but even just an early game Revel with this flat damage being a little much here. So just a very small nerf, about 5% across the board. So,
yep.
Cool. Tempest is another one that I think Tempest 2 continues to be a very good splash. No problem there, just taking a little bit of attack speed off. But if you're willing to go Tempest 6 or even Tempest 8, Ao Shen is a powerful champion, but the trait's just not quite giving him the kick we wanted. We didn't want to buff the damage of the actual Tempest Storm. It's already chunking, 40% of the entire team's health. But giving a pretty sizable attack speed buff here, that should get your Ao Shen casting pretty quickly. Could make Tempest Emblem a little bit more of an attraction here. Not a huge buff or anything like that, but should just make this a little bit more tempting.
Yeah, and as you'll see through a lot of these slides, basically, we're going to be buffing the very high ends of some of these traits. Not just because we want everyone to play verticals or anything like that, but it should be more of a decision right now. It isn't really. You play around the 4 and the 5 and the 6 levels, and then you just opt out of the, going for the high end pieces. So we're trying to make it so that you can decide whether or not you want to go that route, and also makes some of the augments like the heart augments basically more tempting.
Yep. Speaking of which, I'll go out of order here and do another one that's in this bucket. Warrior. And yes, I know it's the wrong icon. Get over it. Warrior 4 and 6 were kind of fake traits that no one was willing to invest into. So buffing those up. 4 gets a small buff, nothing too crazy, because 4 is something you can hit pretty early. But if you're willing to go 6, the payoff should be really worth it here. You'll get some really big damage with 6 Warrior here.
Yep.
Cool. Trainer. Trainer is another one of those things that, backed by Tristana, is a little bit too much power early on. So we're lowering the base health. That being said, if you invest in Trainer, you won't really notice this reduction. It's really only applicable in the early game, is where you're really going to feel it. But we're upping the damage of Namzi 2, 3, and 4, the base. And you'll notice it's quite a bit at like Namzi 3 and Namzi 4 especially. And this is also to incentivize you to run Trainer 3. We're seeing a lot of Trainer 2, not nearly as much Trainer 3. If you're willing to run Trainer 3 and you've stacked up that Namzi, this can be some pretty big damage. In Hyper Roll, we're reducing the chance of double snack a little bit. No big deal. And then finally, Namzi's Fireball applies a burn, but it was really confusing how that burn didn't have healing reduction when every other heal reduction in the game does. So we're making that consistent now. And Namzi's Fireball also applies that anti-heal burn.
Yeah, really trying to make Trainer 3 more enticing. There was not really other much reason to play Trainer 3 other than to give your Namzi more stacks. And now it's like, well, maybe you care about Namzi's damage. Maybe you put some chalices, you get Eye of the Storm, you get built different, then you have Namzi being your true carry. That'd be a lot of fun.
We'll see. We'll see. All right, on to the champion side. Nidalee, probably. I mean, Kent was right. The most resistant champion to nerfs. We are nerfing Nidalee a little bit more, especially because she's such an easy champion to force at 3-1, 3-2. So losing a little bit of bonus attack speed on that spell and losing some of that AD ratio on that third hit. She should still be pretty good. Honestly, I still think we'll see Nidalees. They just won't probably be quite as good, but I think Nidalee will be fine.
Kent was right.
Lilia. Lilia, I think, has been kind of the underperforming underdog. I think people want this to be a carry, and it really hasn't been. So really trying to give it some love here. Buffing the HP, the attack speed to give it more chances to cast. A little less AD because we don't really want her doing a bunch of AD damage. And then buffing the spell, especially at 1 and 2 star. So that way that her early game is okay. So like a 3 mage with an early Lilia 2 should be a threat. Now we do know there is some of these issues where she casts and then like her second cast can often miss, but her low mana cost and higher attack speed now should help her cast more often, be a little bit more survivable. I'm hoping we see some, Gunblade / Bloodthirster builds with some high AP where Lilia can actually do well. So hopefully this can be the start of some Eep comps.
Yeah, I know Mort's really excited for this Lilia comp to take off and finally be good because uh, she's struggled and we had thought she was good, especially after the buffs from last patch, but ends up she's still really really struggling to be an actual carry, especially in the early game. She's just kind of hard to stabilize off of. So just like the buff at 2 star is actually really large. So if you get that early, you should be able to streak pretty hard. And the goal here is to make Lilia like the early game mage threat.
Yep. Nami, I think this is probably one of the scarier changes of the patch for sure. But after the mana lock change, we didn't quite. We were a little conservative with our changes here, and I think Nami was one of the bigger victims of that mana lock change. And especially in the Astral comp. So we're just going to let her cast a little more often. It's only a reduction of 1 auto, but with some damage taken, you can maybe get it less. But TLDR, Nami should cast a little more often and hopefully help mages be a little bit more decent, as well as Astral. So,
yeah, the comp's really struggling right now in the early game, and so this change to Nami, this change to Lilia, and one more that you'll see, a small one that you'll see later, should help.
Yep. Tristana. Tristana was just a little too strong in the early game, and I think people who had figured out that Tristana early to carry you into a Corki comp was really, really good. But B, Tristana is also part of a larger batch of changes you're going to see to AD champions across the board, where we're just going to lower their attack speed, making them a little less good with Ginsu's, a little less good in general. They're just outputting way too much DPS compared to our AP champions. So going to see a lot of attack speed reductions across the board, and Tristana is one of the first victims of that.
Yep, I think you covered it.
Cool. Swain, speaking of attack speed champions, this is another one that's getting that attack speed reduction, as well as a base health reduction. That base health scales really well with Dragonmancer and Shapeshifter, and having this backline champion have that much health is a little much. Honestly, this isn't going to do that much because it doesn't really get affected by Dragonmancer too much. But we're just trying to bring Swain down a little bit, and that attack speed should be a big chunk of it.
Yeah, with this health nerf, and then later you'll see a small Shapeshifter 2 nerf. We're kind of targeting the Dragonmancer Shapeshifter double skilling here, and also overall just the attack speed nerf to reduce his DPS.
Yep. Speaking of which, Varus, another champion to very easily 3-star. We're seeing a lot of 3-star Varuses at like 4-1, some as early as 3-2. Again with the Astral comp, but TLDR, the amount of DPS he can output just from pure attack speed, Ginsu's Hurricane, Deathblade, etc. Too much. Another attack speed reduction here.
Yep.
Volibear. So this is a change I'd been alluding to for a while, but the difference between 2-star Volibear and 3-star Volibear because of the targets was actually kind of fake, because oftentimes you'd come down to like Volibear versus 3 people, and the difference between 2-star and 3-star Volibear was non-existent. We're fixing that. So now Volibear always hits 4 targets, but does less damage at 1 and 2-star and more at 3-star. Now, I know some of you are doing the math already and going, hey, at 3-star, you have this listed as a buff, but 5 times 190 is greater than 4 times 215. This is less damage. And that's true. At the start of a fight, this is a nerf to a Volibear. But by the end of a fight, or when it comes down to those often one-on-one situations, this should be a buff to Volibear 3 and a slight nerf to 1 and 2. That way he can keep his high attack speed, just a little less AP scaling here.
Yeah, with the scaling targets, it became really weird because Volibear often like kills a few targets early in the fight, then the number of targets just stops mattering. And so being able to have the actual lever and the spell damage and help will let us tune him a lot more carefully, like with a lot more detail, basically in the future.
Cool. 4 costs. I'm just gonna say them together. Corki and Zaya are basically the 2 physical damage carries in the endgame, clearly carrying the endgame insanely well with their high attack speed and their high damage. So they're both getting hit with that attack speed reduction.
Yeah, this hits Zaya a little bit harder because she really relies on that attack speed to scale with Rage Wing, Swift Shot, Ginsu's, all that stuff. But it also hits Corki because a DPS champion uses Rage Blade, all that kind of stuff. So these should both reduce the amount of damage that they output throughout the game.
Yep. Hecarim. We like where Hecarim is. Really good champion. Play alongside Ornn. The odds of him getting a second cast is pretty low. We lowered that mana a little bit just to maybe give you a second cast. Hopefully this helps a little bit. Hecarim does have pretty high base attack speed as well. So maybe there is a world where Hecarim gets a second cast, but just a slight nudge to maybe make it at least a possibility instead of a it's never going to happen.
Yeah, kind of incentivizing you to maybe put some items so you can get that second cast off, or maybe even trying some sort of weird build if you want, but just kind of opening that up where before, he was just there as a stun bot.
So I'm mostly kidding, but Swift Shot Hecarim. Just saying.
Yeah, his base attack speed is actually high, as Mort mentioned, so, it's higher than Zaya's now.
Yeah. All right, on the 8-cost side, I think this is the slide everyone's kind of waiting for here. Deja, we're basically just power shifting. This is meant to be neutral. Deja, we're pretty happy with. Deja is the line. We just want a little bit more power in the spell, the wave, and a little less in the autos. So we're just taking 5 damage out of the autos, which honestly isn't even that big a nerf, to put 25 into the wave and hopefully help that wave scale even more, hit even harder. There's a world where Deja 1 might still need another 25 here, but we wanted to go light just to not wildly shift into a Deja meta and who can hit Deja first. But this should put Deja pretty much, I think, right where we want her now, finally.
Yeah, she's starting to have an identity, and this just moves her more into the identity, cements her more as the identity that she's supposed to have.
Yep. Xiaoyu and Siphon, the 2 big boys of 12.12b. Xiaoyu, we're just lowering the damage of his combo by quite a bit. It's like a 20% nerf in that combo, pretty big. A lot of people were running Bloodthirster Edge of Night plus 1 offensive item, and he was still one-shotting folks. Not really okay. We kind of want you to have to either invest 2 offensive items to get that, or consider him more of a defensive champion. Also, the fact he was doing that much damage and doing group-wide CC, not really okay. So we're lowering the CC as well. This should get Xiaoyu pretty close to where we want him for a dragon. Still a very exciting champion to get, just not quite as dominant.
Yeah, as you can see from the numbers, it's a pretty large nerf, and so really incentivizing to put more damage items. Or you can even go a defensive route. You just won't be dealing as much damage, not wiping teams anymore, basically, with that. So
yep.
Should put her in a good spot.
Yep. Siphon. Siphon was designed to charge in and bite one target and eat them alive, and he does that very well. He also was designed to, attack and build up those whisper stacks. He does that very well. What he wasn't designed to do was charge into a group of people and eliminate, 70% of their health. And he was doing that because that AD ratio combined with the whisper stack was a lot of power. So we're pulling a lot of power out of this charge. The charge is now basically the equivalent of getting hit with 1.5 autos. Not really a big deal. But this should be a pretty big nerf and make it so that actually grouping up against Siphon won't be nearly as punishing.
Yeah, the damage comes down a lot, and once Whisper stacks up, this can actually still be a decent chunk of damage, but in the first like half of the fight or more, it's not going to really be hitting that hard anymore. And so a lot of the emphasis is on the bite, on the charge, being able to move around, that kind of thing. But not until later in the fight will you start to see bigger numbers on the charge, and that's kind of where he's supposed to be.
Yep. All right. Five costs. 5 and 10 costs have just kind of been a little underperforming. Only a little. I mean, like Yasuo's still very good. Aoshen, great when you can stack them. But we really want to make sure all the 5 costs are very tempting when you see them in the shop. Like, really tempting. No more these level 8 roll downs when you just, like, skip them. So Zoe is going to be able to cast more. Pyke is going to gain some more health, so it won't be nearly as fragile. And Soraka is going to be able to heal her team even more, in addition to having Starcaller. So Soraka should be pretty good on your team.
Yep.
Cool. 10 cost dragons. Let's skip Aurelion Sol for a second. Shyvana, generally pretty happy with the rework. It's not perfect by any means, but still a little underperforming. So what we're doing is we're lowering her tankiness just a little bit, but in exchange, she gets to cast her Fire Breath more often, one less auto. So instead of 5, it's 4, which is good. And the base damage is going up at both levels. So even at 1 star, a Shyvana with some AP items should be able to melt some teams pretty quickly. Hopefully this makes Shyvana pretty desirable.
Yeah, the mana change will help a lot with her consistency. Even if she misses, she can more reliably get a second cast out and actually like melt a clump on the other side of her. Um, so that should be a very nice change. And then just giving more spell damage. She already is hitting hard, and so now it's just even more reliable. Like if only a few of the ticks hit, you might still actually kill things.
Yep. All right, Aurelion Sol. So this one, we had 2 pretty clear goals. There were a bunch of goals, but let's go with 2 main ones here. One is that Aurelion Sol would be good in any comp without items, and you'd still kind of want him to kind of make up for the fact that his trait is Astral, which you may not be playing. And then 2 is to actually make him a potential AP carry that you actually would want with something like, your Shojin Gunblade Deathcap kind of build. So he's been kind of reworked here, and the way it works now is he'll cast his 2 hex wide AoE base black hole always. It won't scale in size and damage. But he'll cast that, and when it hits, it does a good chunk of damage and debuffs them with a 20% damage taken debuff. So this basically says, hey, your whole team now does 20% more damage to those units. That's really, really good. It's the same as Bard, except for 10 seconds, and it stacks with Bard, and it stacks multiplicatively with things like Giant Slayer and Crit and stuff like that. So this is a very powerful team-wide debuff. Slap a single blue buff on him, and he'll cast instantly. So you can get some really good utility out of it. In addition, if Aurelion Sol lives to 20 seconds into the fight and casts, those black holes will now encompass the entire map and do 50% more damage. It's not really intended to be like a stall comp per se, but if the fight goes that long, it'll allow him to finish off the targets. And so this should put Aurelion Sol as a premier caster. These base spell damage numbers are pretty high. If this doesn't work, I'll be very shocked, but should be good in Astral comps, should be good outside of Astral comps. So hopefully we see some of that.
Yeah, we want you to be really excited when you already have an itemized astral team, and then you find an Aurelion Soul, and it's like even without items, this is giving your entire team 20% more damage, and it scales with other forms of damage amp, as Mort mentioned. So it makes it really exciting as like a secondary carry or like just as a utility unit at that point in time. And then also the base damage is high enough that it's like he's just a caster. But he's a caster that you really don't want to let get to 20 seconds because then it hits the entire board. He can't miss. It deals a lot more damage. It's not that he needs to get there to actually kill things. He'll actually still be impactful in the first few casts. But if he gets there, it's going to be scary.
Yeah, 2 things to note here is we've seen a stacked Aurelion Soul basically delete Zayas and Corkis. He's kind of like the anti-backline fragile carry. And in addition, yes, Mage Cap is still okay on him, but it's nowhere near as hardbound. He can function totally fine without Mage Cap, unlike the old version. One other thing to note here is it does say under a random enemy, but this is what we call that Morgana targeting, where it basically tries to pick one of 2 large groups and then picks from there. So it should usually be pretty favorable. So it's not actually pure random.
Yep, I think that's everything on ASOL.
Cool. All right, on to items. And sorry, I don't have fancy pictures. This is what happens when you make a rundown after a long day. Um, okay, first one. Let's talk about this one because this one's a little controversial. Astral Emblem. We brought it back. We tried it for a patch. We had our fun. We experimented with it. We learned our lesson. And on the Phantom scale, probably never coming back again. I don't think there's a world where players will ever be okay with a 3-star 5 cost at level 7. It just breaks all your expectations and understandings of the rules of the game. And I think it just, while it was fun, and honestly, it wasn't even that imbalanced at like Masters Plus, in Double Up, Hyper Roll, and particularly low elos, this was wildly overpowered. And some of the games, I think, if you watched my streams over the weekend, some of those games where I'm like, I'm gonna 3-star Soraka and then sell it and 3-star Yasuo, like that's not really where we want 3-star 5 cost to be. So the team learned from this experiment, great, but it's time to get rid of it.
Yeah, one of the most exciting augments that have existed so far, being able to 3-star as many 5 costs if you have a remover, basically. But um, very exciting. Not, yeah, as Mo mentioned, not like way out of line in terms of balance because it is pretty hard. A lot of conditions to be met. You need to hit this on 2-1. You need to commit to like an astral comp, hit all your astrals, and then from there have enough gold to buy all of these 5 costs. So it's not like easy in to do in high elo, but like if you're kind of above your elo or you're in places like Double Up where you have access to more, it's more stable, you have access to more resources, things like that can make it a lot easier and it's just really not great experience to play against,
Yeah.
basically.
I think the other thing to note here is that the reason it's kind of balanced right now is because Astral is bad, right? Like you're stuck playing Astral. But as we make Astral good and playable and actually a comp, then this becomes pretty strong because you're not like paying this tax of playing Astral. And so
Yeah.
I think that in addition to everything else, but like I said, the big thing here is it breaks your expectations and understandings of how TFT works in an unhealthy way.
Yeah, but well, everyone who sees this still has like one more day, I think, to try to hit Astro Emblem and achieve the dream. So go
Yep.
for it.
Yep. Bramble Vest gets a bit of a buff here. It's been kind of a meme item lately. Uh, Frankly, if you build Bramble Vest and you're up against a full physical damage carry that doesn't have Last Whisper, you should be feeling pretty good about this. You really weren't. So it's getting some more armor. Same with the Radiant. Cool. Jeweled Gauntlet. Doing a bit of a reshift here in power. This is basically supposed to be neutral to slight buff. But generally, we're pulling some of the power out of the critical strike, which will make it a little less variant, and putting the power in the base AP. So this should allow you, in really awkward situations, if you have to throw this on someone like a Nami, you're not going to feel nearly as bad. But in addition, just like having your base AP scale is generally more consistent than the critical strike, which may or may not have value. It also ties it a little too hard to Infinity Edge. This will make this item less tied to Infinity Edge, and you shouldn't feel nearly as bad about throwing a Jeweled Gauntlet on, say, like a Swain or an Aurelion Soul without that Infinity Edge. So hopefully this makes Jeweled Gauntlet a little healthier and a little better.
Yeah, before when you had a Jewel Gauntlet, you ne never really were happy about it until you got other forms of critical strike. So, Infinity Edge, Hand of Justice, Infinity Force, those kinds of things. When you hit them, you're like, now I can finally make use of a Jeweled Gauntlet, and the damage is highly variant. This just makes it way more consistent of like a standard item, and with the added bonus of you get more critical strike damage. And if you do invest and go for the Dream combo, i.e. JG, then you still get the benefit on that side.
Yep. All right, Orn items. Trying to balance these a little bit better. Bring down the high, bring up the low. Infinity Force taking a pretty big hit here, losing 30% crit chance. So that's a pretty sizable nerf. That being said, the item's still really good and gives you lots of stats, so should still be a good item. Obsidian Cleaver losing 10 AD. You still get that 60% shred. We're not taking away the identity, just a little bit of the less passive stats. Rocket Propelled Fist, a little less HP, should still be a decent item. Those were the overperforming items, and then on the underperforming side, Miramana. And yes, I know it's underperforming a little bit because AP champions are underperforming, but also with some of our higher mana costs and things like that, we really wanted this item to be exciting, and so we're going to give it 50 more mana over an additional second, So if you wanted to do something wild like Muramana Aurelian Soul or Muramana Ao Shen, you go right ahead and have your fun. I'm expecting Muramana Rise will be good. Muramana Nami, of course, but hopefully this actually makes this a pretty exciting item and not as bad as it was before.
Kind of like a mage spat on your Ao too.
Yeah,
Um,
basically.
well, one thing to call out on Infinity Force is just this. Like, not only was it giving this 30% crit chance, which is really strong, especially on AD units, it was also synergizing with Infinity Edge really well, giving
Yep.
you a lot of extra damage. And so bringing this down reduces that combo specifically, but also just nerfs overall, like the amount of stats that you get through this item. You still get, it's still a huge stat stake. It's still really good. Probably still one of the strongest Ornn items, but just it was way overperforming.
Yep. Speaking of other items that are overperforming, let's dive into the Shimmer scale items. So again, same kind of goal here, bringing down the top, bringing up the bottom. Crown of Champions, just 100 base less HP. Again, we're trying not to take out the identity and the fun part of these items, so you're going to see us hit a lot of the like base stats behind the scenes, the invisible power, so that way they can keep their core fun, with one exception. So Crown of Champions loses 100 HP. Determined Investor loses 150 HP. You'll notice this isn't red. I think some people could determine that as a buff because now your champion is more likely to die and get that proc. But it also is a nerf, so take it what you will. We'll call it an adjustment. But that leads into Diamond Hands, which needed a big nerf. 4 seconds of immunity on whoever the heck you wanted made you feel pretty helpless. We're lowering that to 2 seconds of immunity, so 2 instances of 1 second, still get that gold, and 100 HP, so that gets nerfed. Draven Axe losing 10 base AD and AS. That still means it can get up to 90 AD, which is still, better than a Death Blade. It's still generating those items. Don't want to remove that yet, but slight nerf to Draven's Axe. Gambler's Blade, I think this buff is pretty crazy, but now goes up to 30 base AP and AS, which means you can get up to 110% attack speed. So that's pretty crazy. Goldmancer Staff, another 10 base AP. Again, these changes are also really good in the early game when you don't have nearly as much gold. So getting, almost 50% more base is pretty high. Needlessly Big Gem, an extra 200 HP to help it survive. That way, because the person you put it on is supposed to survive, this should make it a better item. And then finally, Mogul's Mail basically procced every fight no matter what. By making it go up to 40 stacks, it'll actually be a risk if it'll proc or not. And it gets to be a little bit more clear with only 1 armor and MR per stack. I will also say the 15 HP was a lot of free HP that was synergizing really well. So we're cutting that down to 5. So you can only get 200 HP as opposed to 450. Pretty big nerf there. But should make this item a little bit more fair. And now should make the Shimmer Scale items all pretty equal. Needlessly Big Gem is the one that might be a tiny weak still. But otherwise, this should get everything a lot closer.
Yeah, not much to add here other than, base stats actually contribute quite a lot to power here. So making these changes, you might not appreciate the changes very much, but you should be able to notice like a very somewhat significant power difference basically when you have these items.
Yep. All right, Augments side. Best Friends, one of the overperforming generic combat augments. So we're just pulling out a little bit of the attack speed. The armor will actually stay at 15, 25, 35. But the attack speed is going to go down just a little bit. This was a very, very good combat augment, trying to bring that down just a microscopic amount.
Yeah, overperforming. So bringing down the stat that is contributing to that overperformance.
Yep. Blue Battery. TLDR here, it now sets your mana to 20 as opposed to add 20, which basically all that really means is it doesn't stack with blue buff. No more blue buff, Blue Battery, Karma / Ezreal. And for anyone going, well, then how are those champions supposed to be viable? If we need to buff them, we will. We will happily buff them. But being reliant on a specific item plus augment combo to be the only way to be viable is not okay. And their power was just a little unhealthy. So this is now not going to stack.
Yeah, blue buff plus blue battery on Karma and Ezreal were so much stronger than that combo without, or than those units without this combo. And so untying that gives us a lot more like precision to be able to balance those units around, just having blue buff or just having blue battery.
Yep. And before anyone asks, I think the question will be then why aren't you buffing Karma and Ezreal? Karma we've actually seen do very well without this augment, so we're not really that worried about Karma. We've seen Karma do pretty well, really good top 4 comp. Ezreal could have used a like very small 5% buff, but we wanted to let it sit with everything else kind of coming down. We don't want to accidentally end up in like an Ezreal Karma reroll meta, so that's why we didn't touch those champions.
Yep.
Cool. All right, Cluttered Mind. The great debate continues. We had this at 4 XP. Players called foul, said it was wildly OP, especially compared to Clear Mind. We listened. We nerfed it to 3. It's now sitting at one of the worst augments in the entire game, right next to Cruel Pact, and no one really takes it. So we're putting it back to 4. Let's see what happens. Will it just be wildly OP? I don't think so, but let's find out. If it is, then maybe we'll have to ship 3.5. Just kidding. We would never do that. But yeah, should be interesting.
We've had some pretty good discussions around this with challenger players, with Mort and all of us. And when it was at 4, it looked bad in the data, but challenger players were like, "Well, this is really broken." And Mort was like, "I think it's really strong too." And I was like, "I don't know, you know." And so we had like a long discussion of like why it could be really good, why it might look bad in the data, and it kind of came to the conclusion that like I think it is just like hard. It was just like too good and not actually looking good in data because players haven't learned the set. A lot of, it makes you really dizzy, things like that. So we reduced it. But, we tested that out for a couple patches and now we're bringing it back up. We're going to see how it does. If it's, actually wildly overpowered, which it might be, then we're going to look for other ways to find solutions. But I feel like this is where it should be.
Cool. Cybernetic implants. Definitely of the 3 cybernetic variants, this is the one that's overperforming the most. Turns out giving flat AD is very valuable. So we're pulling back on that flat AD. To be honest, I think these numbers might actually end up needing to be something like 5, 10, 20, but we wanted to go light and not overkill here, so let's see how this plays out. There's also a world where we might need to hit the other cybernetic variants as well, but for now we want to go light, see how this plays out. But this one definitely needed to be brought down.
Yeah, you might be looking at it and be like, well, those numbers are so small, but things like health and AD just are generally, and attack speed are just generally really powerful for any team. It increases DPS, increases, defensiveness, and it just those specifically scale well with other parts of the game. And so just even little amounts of, those stats are really impactful.
Yeah. Speaking of giving too much AD, Double Trouble was giving a lot of AD. I think the most famous version of this on live right now is the Double Trouble Varus comp, where it's very easy to 3-star that Varus, get that extra 2-star Varus, and now you have a Varus with another 40, 50 AD. It's a little much. Double Trouble doing very well here. There's a world where we need to unbind the AD from the other stats, because I don't really like that we had to nerf like the armor and MR here, but for now, we did need to bring this down, so it goes down to 22, 33, 44, which is great because it looks all doubly and looks hilarious. But small nerf there. But in addition, nice quality of life change. Let's say you already have a 3-star Nidalee, and then Double Trouble appears in your shop. You can now take it. It will then spit out a 2-star Nidalee, and you can run Double Trouble. No more of this like getting baited. So this is a nice quality of life change for Double Trouble if you've already got a 3-star.
Looking forward to the highlights where someone hits Double Trouble on stage 4. They have a full astral board, 3-starred, and all these orbs just come flying out, and then you get to collect everything. So it'd be fun.
Yep. Hallucinate has been underperforming a bit. Going to be really cautious with this one though, because I have heard stories of it doing very well. 6 seconds of 90% damage reduction is going to be very good. I think this will open up some Hallucinate electric builds. We'll see, but hopefully this makes Hallucinate very tempting.
Yep.
March of Progress is another one, kind of like Cluttered Mind, where March of Progress at 5 XP was very, very good in set 6. So we brought it down to 4 XP. Now it's sitting dang near the bottom. So we're going to try to put it back to 5 XP, see where it ends up. If it ends up wildly OP again, we'll figure something out. But for now, we want to try it on the more fun side than the less fun side.
Yeah, but especially as a Prismatic, we can lean a little bit more fun and see how that plays out. And if it is wildly OP, we'll keep an eye on it for sure.
Yep. And finally, Ricochet, just some improvements to how far things will bounce. Hopefully Ricochet will now hit better targets for you and should be a slight buff to the augment.
Yeah, and to clarify, further targets doesn't mean the farthest unit, but it just means it checks to see if it can bounce farther. It won't bounce like all the way across the map, that kind of thing. But it will bounce more reliably and hit other units rather than bounce from a frontliner to another frontliner and not really deal much AoE damage.
Cool. All right, small stuff. Gonna blaze through these. Evoker 4 and 6 underperforming a little bit. +1, +2. Shouldn't be too crazy, but this combined with Aurelion Soul should be pretty helpful. Guild, we're adding a 7 guild chase trait. So if you get like the guild heart plus a guild emblem, you can hit 7 guild. Goes from 200% to 250%. Should be fun. Should add another cool chase if you want to hit it. Scale Scorn, we updated the tooltip to be clearer on how that works. Hopefully that helps clear up the confusion. The amount of times people asked if Olaf even worked with Scale Scorn was a little disheartening, so hopefully that helps. Shapeshifter, as we mentioned, Shapeshifter 2, a little bit too much value, whereas Shapeshifter 6, not nearly as much. So this will incentivize you to go deeper, and Shapeshifter 2, not quite as good, but very small adjustment here. And then Starcaller for Hyper Roll, giving you 20 HP to hopefully end those games a little quicker, and not put you in the situation where you, like, hit full health, then lose, then hit full health, then lose. So hopefully Starcaller should be better in Hyper Roll.
Yeah, the heal full health. Once you're full health, the extra stars will, deal damage and like wipe the board basically, and so that helps you end fights. And for Shapeshifter, the nerf at 2 is a small hit to Nico, small hit to Swain, and so should help bring those down just a little bit.
Yep. On the champ side, Vlad is another one that, despite the 3 massive buffs we gave him last patch, still suffering a little bit. That monolock change we talked about earlier really hit him hard. So just 10 mana to get him casting a little bit. I think this is going to make Vlad a very desirable champion. I think we're going to see a lot more early Vlad 2s do a lot more work than we were expecting. Should now be along the lines of the Tom Kench 2s, the Leona 2s. I expect to see a lot more Vlad 2. On the opposite side, Braum, we updated his tooltip to make it very clear that he raises his shield towards the largest group of enemies. So that should help make it clear how to position Braum.
Yep.
Cool. On the small side, Nico 3. I think Nico 3 is this really awkward champion where she gains a ton of health and shield, and then maybe not even cast because no one ever gets through the shield until they kill the rest of your team. But we buffed that shield for now just to give Nico 3 a little bit more love. Might still need some work. We'll figure it out. Talon, 5 AD nerf. Just, again, he's one of those really high-performing utility champions. Gives 10 AD to your whole team, which is very powerful. We are considering a possible like guild nerf to Talon specifically. If we do that, we'll bring that up. But for now, just hitting him and seeing how that goes. Bard 1 versus Bard 2, there isn't really much of a difference right now. An extra 0.5 seconds on the stun, not really worth. And Bard 1 is a lot of utility. So Bard 1, we're losing another 0.25 seconds. Should make the jump from Bard 1 to Bard 2 a little bit more appreciable. And then finally, Yasuo, another victim of the AD, losing 5 AD here, just making him a little less powerful, but still very, very good with all the CC he provides. And there was a rare case where if like Yasuo tried to execute a 20,000 health champion, he would fail. That is not intended and will not happen anymore. He will always execute the target no matter how much health they have.
Yep. For Bard, just Bard 1 provides guild really easy to get Mystic in and gives you the extra dutes, and so just so much value in that unit while also providing a stun and damage amp on his spell. So all of that, we're taking just a little bit off of that stun.
Yep. Cool. All right. Archangel Embrace and Ginsu's and their Radiant versions now have a stack counter. Does this do anything? No. Was it literally the most asked question on my stream all weekend? Yes. It's just cool to see how high can you get your Rage Blade stacks up to. I think the highest I saw over the weekend was like 79. How high will you get to? Should be fun. So.
Wow, that's a very high number.
Yeah.
I want to see the hundreds.
Yeah, I'm sure someone. Sean TFT, now is your time. So.
Yep.
Zerat Portal should now work more reliably with and against assassins. That's been a long time coming, so cool.
Yep.
And then on the augment side, combat training, just giving it 3 extra starting AD. It was a little hard to get it to take off. Very tiny buff here. Barely is going to make a dent, but should make this augment a little more exciting. Living Forge, this one's a massive quality of life change. Can no longer grant Orin artifacts it already granted you. So no more double or triple Randuin's Omen. You can
Black
actually get
Cleaver.
yeah, 2 black cleavers. Yeah, exactly. So it will now give you 3 different Orin artifacts. And then finally, this is pretty funny, but Makeshift 3 underperforming a little bit, just 5 extra armor and MR for a prismatic.
Yep.
Cool. And then bug fixes. Varus's arrows now visually fire out of his bow instead of slightly below it. Funny. Double up, the release timers during the shared draft are now properly oriented for all players, making it easier to see when you're about to be released. Great. Legend units can no longer fail to gain their stat bonuses from a sacrifice unit if they're affected by Zephyr. This should be a nice buff to Legend, no longer affected by that, because Legend sacrifice now occurs before Zephyr triggers, so Zephyr can't hit a unit that immediately sacrificed. Yep. So should be good to go there. Tom Kench's ability damage is now correctly blocked by Banshee's Claw. Cool. Shapeshifter Soul now correctly has the right text, so you can all stop messaging me about this. It now grants a Sunfire as it did, with just the proper text. Fixed an issue that allowed Preparation 1 to be offered on 4-2. That shouldn't have been happening. Ash now casts her spell at her attack target rather than the nearest target. Definitely some weirdness with Ash there. Ghost armies that have augments with multiple tiers, like Ludens and Built Different, will now work. So, starting to make progress on Ghost armies getting back to normal. They're still not there fully. Hot Shot will now attribute its burn damage more accurately when multiple cannoneer shots hit the same target. This only affects the damage recap. This isn't an actual change. It's not a buffer, a nerf, or anything. And then finally, fixed an issue causing Shimmer Scale items to pop off in combat in specific situations, causing very problematic situations from occurring. So,
Yep. Lots of bugs that we fixed. Lots more to go through.
I'm about to say, we still have more to do. I think there's a few bugs on here. People are going to go, what about this bug? And the answer is, we know. We're working on it. This is what we can do for now. So, more bugs next patch for sure.
Yep.
So.
Constantly looking at bugs. So don't worry. We have our eye on them. We have priorities, and we're working through them.
Yep. All right. So this is going to be it. Hopefully, we end up in a better spot. My prediction is, I think 3 costs and casters might end up pretty good. I think Aurelion Sol and Ao Shen are going to be kind of the stars of the show here, which, oh no, the 10 cost dragons might be really good. Who would have thought? But, we'll see. Yeah. We'll see where it ends up.
I'm excited to see some Aurelion Sol comps. Some people actually buy Aurelion Sol when you hit him on 7, put some items on him, use him, give him a Shojins, or just play maybe Evoker, which got buffed. So kind of excited to see like a change up of the meta where it's not all AD, you have other options to go for.
Yep. Cool. All right, that's going to do it from us. Hopefully have fun. Let us know how it goes. I'm sure you will. And yeah, thanks for playing TFT and enjoying. So,
yep.
All right, that's going to do it from us. Until next time, take it easy.